Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the CBCS Morning Talk Series. Today we've got Dr. Alex Braczkowski from Griffith Uni. He's a conservation biologist that specialises in large carnivores, and he's a founding member of Uganda's Wildlife Authority technical team on carnivore conservation. And today he's going to talk to us on monitoring charismatic large species. Underway.
Thanks so much. Station. Prepare to disembark. Thanks so much, Tom and Kate, for the opportunity and for the lovely introduction. Yeah, it's great to see some familiar faces from my PhD when I was here at CBCS, and also some new ones. Oh, please. So I've titled my talk, Setting Up International Monitoring Programs for the Wildlife We Love Most. These are just some of the collaborators. And I guess the sort of purpose of the talk is to maybe convince you of essentially two things: the importance of monitoring charismatic wildlife, especially species that are particularly important to tourism economies in developing nations, and then also to actually give you some examples from Kenya and Uganda, from some of our programs there, as to sort of how we have managed to roll out monitoring schemes at national scales. As Tom said, I'm a conservation biologist. A lot of my work over the last 7 years, since 2017, has been largely in Uganda and East Africa. This is a photograph with a couple of my collaborators. The man in the middle is called Dr. Arjun Gopalaswamy, and the reason I've got a photo of him is because a lot of the ideas I'm going to be talking about here are largely his ideas. You know, they've been kind of driving me from my PhD, so I'm an avid disciple of his, and I thought I'd just give credit to him. When I'm not doing the conservation science, I like to take pictures, and if any of you have got Disney Plus at home, you can catch a couple of my documentaries, one called Tree Climbing Lions and another one called Tree Climbing Lions Return to Uganda, which my fiance and I made 2 years ago. So the CBCS and Seas connection. So I was an alum of Martine Marin. So I was in the Marin lab for 4 years. I was a PhD student, and my thesis focus was looking at human-carnivore conflicts, both in India and Uganda. I was looking at the efficacy of compensation schemes in a place called the Lake Mbura National Park, and then also examining a very peculiar population of African lions that have this weird behavior of climbing trees. And the reason I wanted to speak to all of you today is because that foundation from my PhD really has served a lot of the work that I've been doing today. So this is that peculiarity I'm talking about. So, 150 to 240 kilogram cat managing to somehow scrummage its body into a Euphorbia candelabra tree. So they climb those, and it's one of only a handful of populations in the whole of Africa that have this cultural habit of climbing trees. But Uganda in of itself is a very incredible country. It's just shy of 300,000 square kilometers, so one of the smallest countries in the whole of Africa. But it's interesting because it's got the highest levels of vertebrate species richness in the whole continent. It's got some of the last populations of large tusk-bearing bull elephants. It's got these incredible pelicans that live in these salt lakes. It's got shoebill storks that live in large tracts of what they call the swamp forests. And then that's actually a little video of my research vehicle, Suzuki Jimny, that I was doing my PhD fieldwork in. And that's my research assistant, Sam Isoke. So large protected areas, there's a protected area that's really made up of about sort of 6 key parks. And those range in size from anything about 300 to about 4,000 square kilometers in size. But I want to jump back to these guys, these African lions that climb trees. So there was a study done about 15 years ago by Andy Plumtree, and he estimated that roughly every lion in this population in Queen Elizabeth National Park on the Congo-Uganda border is worth roughly $13,000 to the local tourism economy. So every lion that you see in a tree, that's what it's generating from tourism. And I guess that's really what my talk's about today. Should we be monitoring these things? And I guess that's my sort of first question. There's a really good paper that Brendan Winkle talks about this whole question about what kind of monitoring should we do, and should we actually be doing monitoring? And there's, for those of you that have seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, Matt Hanna, maybe he can explain to us.
No. Number one rule of Wall Street.
Yeah. How do we turn this up?
stock is going to go
sorry,
up,
I'm gonna-
downside. No. Number one rule of Wall Street. Nobody, I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or if you're Jimmy Buffett, nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in fucking circles. Least of all stockbrokers. Right? It's all a fugazi. You know what a fugazi is?
No, Fugazi. It's fake.
Yeah, fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not fucking real.
Right. All right.
Right. Stay with me.
The reason that I show that clip, for those of you that have seen the movie in its totality, is that I think what Matt Hanna really hits on is inadvertently, and he doesn't know this, but a lot of the conservation kind of biology commentaries that we have in some of the most prestigious journals when it comes to things like African lions. There's a lot of to and fro as to how many of these animals we actually have left in Africa, specific subpopulations, and also some of the key reasons for their declines. But when you actually start to look under the surface and you actually dig into some of the supplementary information sections of these scientific papers, some of the appendices of these papers, you actually start to see that not only are there really big temporal scales over when these surveys were done, but also the actual methods that scientists were using. There might not be all that much to them. So as part of one of my PhD chapters with Martin, I actually looked at the specific problem with African lions. We wanted to see, how consistent are the methodologies that are being used for African lion counts. We essentially looked at 169 papers over a 100-year period on Web of Science and Google Scholar, and hit certain keywords like census, density, abundance, and basically try to figure out, what methods are people using. And the overwhelming majority of scientific counts that have been used are direct observations. Tom may be able to tell you a little bit more about this because he's doing a review in Australia about monitoring methodologies for a host of different placental mammals. But basically, the biggest danger with that is that what this would entail, a direct observation study, you'd be basically driving around a national park, say Nairobi National Park, and we'd be physically driving and counting lions. So 1 lion, 2 lion, 3 lion, 4 lion, 5 lion, and then fence lining a given area, and then trying to basically divide the total number of lions that we found by a given surface area. Now, the biggest problem with that is that the study doesn't inherently factor in arguably the biggest single parameter. It's a noise parameter called detection probability. And basically, if you can imagine, you're driving around and you have essentially a biological or ecological screen in front of you, where essentially you cannot disentangle whether the fact that you're not seeing a lion is not because of whether the lion truly isn't there, or if there's something else that's going on. Perhaps it's a riverbed. He's in a riverbed, he's behind some tall grass, he's behind some big trees. And that's inherently dangerous because we tend to overestimate populations because we don't actually factor in this parameter. Sorry, Kate, how are we doing on time?
Less than 10.
We're less than 10 minutes. Okay, so can we just, for the sake of argument, have I sort of convinced you that maybe we should monitor these species, just for the sake of moving forward with this talk? Now, can I just open this up to the floor? So why should we monitor? And there's sort of two hypotheses that I'd like to sort of maybe get from people in the crowd here. So I gave this a flavor of this talk in Sri Lanka 6 weeks ago, but that was to largely a popular audience. A lot of us here study sociology, political ecology. So maybe there's some interesting reasons that maybe a few people can give me. So can anybody sort of give me reasons, just a few reasons as to why we might want to monitor these charismatic wildlife? I'm just going to start throwing things up. Just shout it out. Anybody? Anybody?
Engage the public.
Yeah, engage the public. It's a good one. Yeah, policy. Yeah, that's exactly it. So we kind of want trends over time. There we go. Numbers are key to management. Anybody else? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so economic value.
Reproduction.
Yeah, exactly. Fecundity. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, demography. That's on there.
Climate change impacts.
Yeah, sure. So impacts, that could be ecological. It can be from climate change. There's the avoid chaos one. I love it to put up there, and I'm just going to try to speak for 10 seconds. So basically, there was these 2 counts done in the Masai Mara of lions, about 12 years apart, one in 92, one in 2014. Use different methods, half the number of lions. That's why I always put this avoid chaos, because that just absolutely blew up in the media. Kenya's lost half its lions, absolute chaos. When you actually go and do good science in the Masai Mara, you'll find that is the most stable lion population anywhere in Africa. The lions there are not only occurring at the highest densities, but overall, apart from the flux that you see in different conservancies, the population roughly stays at about 400 individuals. Okay, last chance. Anybody else? Yeah.
Prioritize actions and
Yeah.
dynamics of the ecosystem changing.
Yes, I like prioritize actions, yeah, and the dynamics of the ecosystem. But so some of you came pretty close, but I have two alternative hypotheses. First one is accountability. It's one that we don't think about a lot in conservation. I think it's one that we maybe should be thinking more and more, and I'm going to talk about that now. So accountability is one, and the second one is conflict resolution. So accountability, this is Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm sure a lot of you might have heard of him, know who he is, but for those of you that don't, it's about $10 billion locked up in his FTX exchange, cryptocurrency. All sorts of different digital currencies, all sorts of different retirements, all sorts of different nest eggs invested in this exchange, and people cannot get that out. So he defrauded about $10 billion worth of assets. Now, when this comes to conservation, you roughly need the estimates from Jennifer Miller and Peter Lindsay's group came up with a figure of roughly $1 billion you need annually to safeguard Africa's last lion and elephant populations across the protected areas in Africa. So if you look at all of the protected area systems across continental Africa, about 90% of them are underfunded, and over 75% on average is what the budgetary shortfall is for protected area management. And you'll often hear from NGOs, from different entities that have a vested interest in lions, we're in the business of saving lions, not in counting them. I call that big talk. And what that often, I think, causes is that the stories are larger than the lion populations and the impacts that a lot of these entities might be confessing to achieve with them. So from a Ugandan perspective, this is kind of like the Ugandan lion landscape of different entities. And the reason I've got it here is just to show you some of the complexities of who is working in these parks. So you have big NGOs like the Wildlife Conservation Society, a local NGO called the UCF, Uganda Conservation Foundation, that does a lot of desnaring initiatives. The Uganda Carnivore Program does a lot of monitoring and tourism-based work. Biodiversity Solutions is a consultancy firm that does a lot of population assessments. Snares to Wear is another really good one. One of my collaborators, Tutilo Mudumba, is doing a lot of snare removal across the country. And then you have different entities, whether it's photographers, hunting concessionaires, local universities, a lot of people with different interests in African lions and their management. And then also, what's interesting in Uganda is you have one of the largest oil conglomerates anywhere in the world, a French oil company called Total. They turned over $20 billion in revenue last year, and they have an oil extraction operation right in the heart of arguably the most pristine lion and elephant territory in the whole of Uganda. It's going to be 10,000 barrels leaving that park, Murchison Falls National Park, every single day. And then there's obviously all the donors that are giving money to these different entities. And I just think it's interesting because when you look at this whole issue of accountability and just nature accounting, there's near zero data on how these things are doing. Just lions, how are lion populations doing in this country? So if you look at the last sort of more comprehensive survey that was done on lions in the country, that was in 2008 to 2009. So that's what, nearly 15 years ago. And that was the last count, 408 lions across 3 national parks across the country. That's pretty much the only shred of information we have on how lions are doing in Uganda. But we have more and more of this that seems to be affecting the populations of lions and the people that live alongside them across the country. A lot more snaring, a lot more wheel traps. This is a lion called Jake. How are we doing on time? 50, great. The other hypothesis that I had in that initial sort of web of ideas as to why we should be monitoring is actually to do with conflict. So how many people here have worked on large charismatic megafauna any time in your careers? Okay, now how many people have sort of at one point in their research or science gotten quite invested and, you know, sort of been a spokesperson for that species or particular area or research project? I know I have. You know, it's often a very deep feeling that comes from the base of your stomach. You know, you start to kind of feel like there might be some kind of like, ownership or territory over this animal or over this project. And then often what that leads to is you either get politely told to leave or maybe someone chases you out. And I think this, again, not only in Uganda, but broader in the charismatic sort of carnivore world is, I'm yet to meet a fierce frog biologist. It seems that the kind of the likelihood for conflict seems to increase with the size of the animal. And in a Ugandan context, what you'll often see is that there's a lot of not only different entities that are jostling for the rights to protect a certain species or work over a particular population of animals. But there's often obviously conflict, data sharing, there's fighting over funders. So with both of those things, the reason why we should monitor, and then this one particularly, is that we could potentially use the monitoring activity and the whole idea of learning a skill, a particular statistical technique, looking for lions in the landscape, that in of itself could be a unifying activity to potentially bridge some of those burnt bridges between these different entities, different independent researchers. And that's at least sort of the thinking as to sort of why we should be involving as many different entities as possible. So I guess the sort of last part of my talk is, so what is some of the work that I've been engaged in Uganda? And I think the most important word here is we. So over the last 7 years, I've been able to build quite a lot of cool collaborations with different entities. And in the last 15 months, really, this has spawned a life of its own. So we've tried to sort of bring about 100 different stakeholders around the table to do a nationwide census in Uganda of the most important protected areas for lions, leopards, and spotted hyenas. But the initial kind of inspiration for that came from Kenya, where I want to just circulate a little document. You can just pass it around, just have a little flip through. My colleagues who have now sort of come and done a lot of workshops with me in Uganda basically leveraged 23 different NGOs and 13 technical partners across 10 protected areas. It's roughly 43,000 square kilometers of protected area land, and basically censused an entire lion population across the whole of Kenya with the government. So in that particular case, they were interested in density and abundance in the main protected areas. Outside of the parks, they were interested in occupancy, and the main methods that they used was camera traps and search encounter for establishing density, and then interviews and camera traps outside of the border of the protected area. So these are some of the images from their extensive effort. That survey, just because of the sheer size of Kenya, took roughly 3.5 years to complete. And there you can see some of the NGO and technical partners in the top right. So that's what it looks like. So the teams there drove about 105,000 kilometers driving, looking for lions. They used call-up stations over 200 times, and they actually got people to physically walk and look for lions. And that effort amounted to about 40,000 kilometers. But the most important part of this, and this is something that Arjun has really transplanted not only from Kenya, but now into Uganda, is this whole idea of sort of on-the-job training. So basically identify the protected area where you're working, basically try and invite as many different stakeholders in that landscape to come and join you in the workshop, and then actually start the census with those entities. And then basically everybody is sort of helping to pull the weight. And it's not really, obviously it's an issue of, trying to involve as many different people and local people, because you want this thing to have legs. So sorry, 20, okay, about 3 more. But then obviously also the species demand it, right? So in all these countries where lions continue to live, they're sometimes moving across multiple international boundaries. So like in Uganda, you have lions that are moving from Uganda into the Congo. I'm pretty sure on the northern boundary of Uganda, I'm pretty certain that the lions are moving across 3 countries there, into Kenya, into Sudan, and back into Uganda. So the species demand that we come together. It's not necessarily just about, bringing people together because you're trying to get as many different people. It's like you need the resources. Otherwise, you just won't get good numbers. So in Uganda, obviously a smaller picture, 6 protected area systems. So we worked in Murchison Falls, Adepo up in the north, Pianupe, which is the second largest protected area. It's over 2,000 square kilometers. Queen Elizabeth, 2,500 square kimeters in size, and that shares a border with Congo. And then Lake Mburo, which is quite important for leopards. That's 375 square kilometers. Those are the parks that we surveyed. So you can see our effort over there, 70 field teams divided into 8 teams, 5 workshops, so basically a workshop at every protected area. And these are just some of the images. So again, trying to mobilize as many different ranger teams in these different places as possible. So this is interesting. This is in a place called Pianupe Wildlife Reserve. So this is actually co-managed currently by a hunting concessionaire called Karamoja Overland Safaris. And they are obviously interested because they want to hunt leopards and they want to do sustainable use of other species. So it's actually in their interest to get good numbers. So we worked with their field teams and set up camera traps across the reserve there. Here in Lake Mburo, we worked with Makerere University to basically try and bring students there. Then we leveraged a local tourism lodge called Mahingo Safari Lodge. And they were fantastic because they just basically ran the survey for us. They used their field team, their ranger guide and guide network. We basically provided them with the equipment, the tools, and the training, and they just basically ran this thing. And then obviously we provided analytical workshops for the different rangers. This is Lillian Namusoke. She'll be speaking at the ICCB in Rwanda. So every day Lillian would basically go out on tourism activities. So she's basically a ranger guide. So we just gave her an iPhone and a camera, and basically she just surveyed the Nile Delta by herself. And it cost us nothing to do. So we just again, just leveraging the existing resources of the Wildlife Authority that want to do these surveys in the parks, but don't necessarily have the capacity to do so, especially on the analytical side of things. This is Silver, same thing, another ranger guide that also did the work in the Nile Delta. And then obviously also we established a technical team headed by the Wildlife Authority and the Tutilo from the Makerere University. And basically that was to also just spear guide a lot of the monitoring. And what are we, like 2 minutes? I got 2 minutes? 2 minutes? Okay, so just to give you an idea as to sort of the sheer volume of effort. So this is Murchison. This is really the beast of the country in terms of size. Still largely, despite the fact that there's oil exploration going on in there, still largely massive tracts of intact savanna, really gorgeous, and a lot of lions. So this park, there was 5 teams, 13,000 kilometers of driving effort, looking for lions every single day, camping out, doing call-up surveys. This is Queen Elizabeth. So this was still from my PhD. We resurveyed that. So this was when I was with Martine. At that point, we did 7,500 kilometers of search effort. Now we've hit 9,000 kilometers. And the reason we've managed to do that is because of the fact that we leveraged 8 different teams doing this. Adepo Valley, this was a particularly difficult one just because of the political instability in that region. So you have what you call Karamojong cattle raiders, both from the Sudanese and from the Ugandan side that sometimes walk with AK-47s. And they will actually get into skirmishes. So, our field teams got involved in a few skirmishes a few times. But this park, we managed to get about 5,000 kilometers of search effort. Unfortunately, there we found almost no lions. 5 lions, 22 times in 5,000 kilometers of driving and 42 call-ups. The last 60 seconds. So it's not just about numbers. So the reason I haven't shared the numbers is just because right now we're finalizing the final government report that will actually is in a way that we can formally release these numbers. But just from some of the existing published work from my PhD of Queen Elizabeth, it's not just about the numbers. It's not, that should never be, I think, in my opinion, the basis for an African lion or charismatic megafauna monitoring program. What you really want is something that will give you an indication of population health. And the cool thing about these search encounter models that are coupled with Bayesian statistics is that they really are using space use of lions. So we're looking at the detection of individual lions, and we're identifying individual lions from their whisker spot patterns. So we're getting these redetections in the landscape over time, and it's those redetections which are allowing us to estimate the movement parameters of lions. And it's that movement, to anyone here that does ecology, we all know that movement is by far the single biggest ecological indicator in nature of how an animal is doing, because we know that the home range and the resource use of an animal are often inversely correlated. So what you're typically looking for is the larger the home range of an animal, it's likely that there's some stressor there, mainly either from prey or because those animals are being killed. And that's what we found in Queen Elizabeth. So it wasn't the fact that we found these low densities of only 3 lions per 100 square kilometers. It was because we found these big sigma values, these huge movements of lions moving in and out of the Congo. So, and also there we found the sex ratios. So that's another thing that these models can do is they can actually indicate to you how the sex ratio is organized. And with lions, which are polygamous felids, we should always be looking at 2 females for every male lion. Here it was inversed. It was 2 males for every female. So there you've already got 2 signals that are showing you that the lions are under stress. Yeah, so this is just a few of our objectives moving forward, but thanks for looking at that document, and we can move on to the discussion. I'm sorry that I rambled towards the end there, but I hope I made some sense, and yeah, just happy to share some of our work. Yeah. Great, thanks. Yeah.
Question in the chat.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty cool. Peter, what about a trade-off between funding, monitoring, and or the generation of conservation actions? When is it important to do what? For example, if there are less than 50 individuals and decreasing, should we monitor or find actions to stop them decreasing? There are more than 100 and stable, what then about 400 and decreasing? Yeah.
Okay, it's an excellent question, Peter. And the answer is actually, in my personal opinion, when it comes to lions, I'm not saying wildlife in general, but lions, I don't really think we have an argument as to why we shouldn't be doing this. And the reason that I say that is because through just those few examples, I mean, don't forget what I've just presented is 15 months start to finish. Anna and I, when we had our first meeting with Agri Ritsiba, the head of wildlife monitoring there, to now, we managed to leverage that many people. And a lot of the people brought their own money, their own cars, their own funding, their own... People want to do this. And don't forget about like Lillian and Silva. They are tourism rangers that are already out looking for lions because that's their job. So it's just about filling in the gaps, filling in the holes. There is, in my view, it's a strong view, there is no reason that we should not be monitoring African lions with intensity and ferocity every year in every protected area in Africa. If we want to do it properly and bring people together and bring the people that actually own those lions and, you know, the national stakeholders, you know, you'll easily be able to do it. Yeah, so that's just for lions. It doesn't answer the broader problem that I'm sure Richard or Jonathan can answer when it comes to more difficult species that live bloody 30 meters in trees or, you know, that you can't detect easily. Then there are definite trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I was going to ask you about that, whether you thought, to what extent does this sort of monetary effort tell us something about biodiversity more broadly? Or are the issues facing lions so specific to them that it only tells us about?
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. And it goes back to the Queen Elizabeth study. So basically basically what Richard is hinting at here, what are these warning signals telling us about the environment? And the expansion in home ranges in that park over a 10-year period of 400% for males and 100% for females, that's showing you that the prey, because lions are moving because of prey, right? Well, it's prey and sex. So for males, it's females. That's how they're governing their space use. And for females, they are governing their space use around water holes and food. So if we see the female home ranges expanding, then we know that something's going on with the prey base. So yes, I think that the lions are inadvertently sentinels for your prey population also. So it's an excellent question.
And just to follow up on that, then the challenge then, I suppose, is to take other actions as a result of signals from the line monitoring.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that then spawn other kinds of environmental monitoring or monitoring for other species in the landscape?
Yeah, you hope. Yeah, I think you hope. Yeah, yeah. The problem, Richard, is that just the monitoring agenda in a lot of East Africa and just Africa in general is it's always it's that, in inverted commas, the big talk of we're saving, we're not interested in counting. Yeah, and you know, again, who looks at their bank account once in 14 years? That's the argument. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I have a question. So I think in the real world, like different parks, they have rangers to do the patrolling, right? They have data. The challenge that how they use the data to make sense. So actually, several NGOs together, they were already designed something called a SMART. Have you heard about it? SMART shoes? Basically, every ranger can use it, so they can lodge the data using that phone or GPS. For example, if they say a lion or the poacher or the evidence. And this kind of software is quite strong, it's free, and link up with our ways like GIS. So then the ranger themselves can easily plug the data into the computer and it can generate the reports automatically. And then you can compare with other countries as well, and you can also calculate, for example, the patrolling efforts in different region. I think it's quite strong too.
It's a good point. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically, sorry, what's your name?
Shu as a shoe.
So Shu was basically saying that there is an existing monitoring. It's not really monitoring. It's more of a data collection entity that exists, and it's called SMART, and it's used globally by ranger teams all over the world. And basically, she was saying, you know, could somehow this monitoring be brought onto the SMART platform? My only issue with SMART is that don't forget that rangers walking around every day have they've got real world problems and threats. You know, they're walking and they might be looking for tiger tracks, but they've got to have their heads on a swivel because there might be a stray AK-47 bullet that's going past their head. So now for a ranger to be walking around doing anti-poaching, because that's what a lot of SMART is feeding, it's anti-poaching, and then they're collecting biological data, to now be looking for lions on foot, I feel that might be a bit limited. But on the contrary of that, so for instance, this method, which basically is just you're driving around looking for lions, and as long as you're monitoring where you're looking, because you're trying to get the detection probability parameter, then you can use it for other animals. So you can use it for giraffes, you can use it for leopards, you can use it for any animal that has a individually distinguishing characteristic. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, camera trap data can be also launched in SMART platform. So my how we can combine the data from different sources. And
I think it's about asking good questions and then designing good data collection tools, not taking data collection tools and retroactively fitting. That's like my whole scientific career, is that retroactively fitting data. You know, yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Maybe I'll start with you. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess in response to the people that say like, oh, I want to save lands and count them.
Yeah.
I suppose the assumption is that the more information you might change your behavior in terms of what you would prioritize for action.
Yeah, I
so
think
you'd
so.
be better at saving because you've got this information.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of actually ways in which you might adjust the conservation measure based on having better data?
I think so. So here, the thing with like this, because this is spatial, it's showing you, it can show you edge effects. So it can show you these hotspots of density. But I think the first thing that you can see, I mean, this is not a great example because of in the 2018 survey, when we did this, we didn't survey large sections of parks. So we have this blue color, which the model is essentially, it's assigning a low detection probability, and it's essentially assigning a low lion density. But you can see these hotspots of where lions live in the park. So immediately you know where kind of areas of where healthy lion populations are. That's the first thing. The second thing, as I say, is the edge effects. So you can see which parts of the park, or where am I seeing conflict. And I think that can also definitely help target your anti-poaching activities for snare removal. If you're having these edge effects and if you're seeing that spatially in representations of lower density, why is that? Is it because of conflict? Is it because of snaring? Yeah, look, and that's the thing. Like I'm kind of stepping back from this. I don't want to be an ecological policeman. Who am I to police other NGOs? That's not the point. All that we're saying is that it's actually the donors that should be bloody policing the people they're giving the money to. I don't know. The more time I spend in this monitoring space, the more like that becomes clear to me. Is like the stories are often bigger than the populations on the ground, and I mean it's fine, whatever. But just yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
So I feel like you sort of were indicating the conflict between various groups, and then you sort of showed how they all came together to do the.
Some of them came together. Yeah,
some of them.
I'm definitely not. Yeah, yeah.
And you gave us a couple of examples of how people were already doing things, and you were kind of leveraging things that are already happening. But why did they choose to do it? Right?
Okay, that's an. Sorry, your name, sir. Yeah. Daniel has an excellent question. Why did they come together? And this you'll often hear in conservation. I'm sure Jonathan's heard it with koalas. I'm sure Richard's heard it with other charismatic species. You'll often hear people saying, we got to do an umbrella, man. We got to start an umbrella. We all got to come together. But then the problem again, there's the centralization. So someone is creating the umbrella, and then people might ask, well, why are you the umbrella holder? And the direct answer to that is that there was a skill, and the skill was the on-the-job training, the workshop, and the teaching the people, this is how to do the robust line monitoring. And you can all do it. And we're going to teach you how to do it, and we're all going to do it together. So Arjun, again, as I say, like I'm a pulpit for Arjun's ideas, because I think he's taken it to a whole new level on steroids. What he did in Nairobi National Park recently with the Kenyan Wildlife Service with Nick, they basically got the WWF to sponsor a workshop. They got the KWS to come in. They brought all stakeholders together. And then from start to finish, they did the training, the count, the paper, and the paper submission in 10 days for the whole park. So like that's how tweaked they've got it. They've got it so down. Like, you know, in Kenya, the Kenyans are just blasting this whole thing to a whole new level. And they're just showing that, yes, we can find the money for this. Yes, we can come together. And yes, we can do the best science, and we can learn something together. So that's an excellent question. Yeah, I hope that answered it. Yeah, yeah.
The criticism of many monitoring programs is there's no link or mechanism or pathway from the monitoring data to change in action. So, you know, if you do the monitoring and there is no consequence for action, or no pathway to change, then in effect, the monitoring has no impact on the decision. So I just wondered, in your context, you've done a monitoring program, you've written your report. What are the mechanisms or pathways you can see to get a change in management?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think the thing that is that I personally see, and it's definitely not established that well yet in Uganda, but I kind of the vision. I mean, I just want to eventually step away from it. Is if you can get the most important stakeholders on the ground doing that monitoring, then that is the biggest catalyzer of the action. Because if Lillian and Silver are doing that monitoring, and if there's someone at the Uganda Wildlife Authority that's doing the data analytics, and that's happening regularly, then inadvertently should the potential motivation for action, arguably the most powerful motivation, will come from them. To flip your question, goes back to the Masai Mara example. So what happens if you don't do the monitoring, or if you do the monitoring 20 years apart, and then you have these horrific headlines that say Kenya's lost half of its lions? You remember that, avoiding chaos. So the meaningful pathways of change. I mean, I think Arjun's vision for this is that half of the battle is you being on the ground. Half of the battle is you looking. Half of the battle is you going out every day, camping in the middle of the jungle and just being there. That is conservation in of itself, because then there's a network. You can call rangers. If you see the poachers, you can remove the snares. That's half the battle won, I think. So I don't think, I don't have any answers. Is like there's some dramatic one-shot, action that comes from all of this. I think it's incremental, and I think, yeah. But sorry, the last point that I have to add also is I think a lot of NGOs want to keep African government's stupid. It's a very harsh thing to say, but I do think there's so much money in this game that, you know, like UA right now, they with all these stakeholder workshops, it's now they are getting the opportunity to lead the stuff themselves. And they can say, well, you know, we're doing this. Give us some of your money. Give us some of that money. Why should you come in and just like bring $500,000 and take all the spoils for yourself? So I guess that's also another way of looking at it. You know, it's like, yeah, kind of spreading out the pie a little bit. Yeah, sorry, there was a few other questions.
I'm just gonna throw it as a discussion because I think you're underselling what you're doing and the pathway to change. And you're saying that the pathway to change is the development of the community, the capacity building within the community
Yeah.
to create that change for themselves as opposed to having it imposed.
Yeah, partly, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you had no time to get into specifics, but I'm just wondering to what extent is the methodology best available science?
Yeah,
How much
Okay.
of the
Yeah.
methodology is actually based on
Yeah.
local knowledge as people are out there on the ground, as you say, presumably they have some feedback on the methodology, so was
yeah.
the methodology sort of imposed from the outside? Or
I
was
mean,
there-
what methodology isn't imposed?
Oh.
What scientific methodology is not imposed by someone?
That's what I'm saying.
No,
So
sure.
was the methodology focused on, or was it?
Well, I'd like to think that we, okay, so I'm going to give you between the eyes, blunt answer. I'd like to think that the methods that we are using right now, largely developed by Arjun Gopalaswamy on tigers in India, Ulas Karanth on tigers in India, they have really opened up the door in terms of, I guess, what the big cat community considers to be the most robust. And yes, I mean, definitely we've taken that, and Arjun has largely been trying to bring good monitoring into the picture. And the reason I bring Arjun into the picture is because if you look at India, so the Indian tiger landscape is fiercely political, and what actually happens there is the Indian government doesn't allow anybody in to audit any of the data. And he has tried to write various scientific rebuttals about how you know, the use of track indices is overestimating tiger abundance in all Indian national parks. And a lot of the numbers that we're seeing coming out of the Indian government are really political populations. This crazy doubling of tiger numbers every 3 years. So I guess his vision is to use, you know, the best statistical methods that are available. But in terms of the knowledge co-production, yes, the data collection, I mean, put it this way, Lillian and Silva are not writing the mathematical formulas, and neither am I. I mean, I'm the biggest idiot when it comes to, you know, I can barely run an R script. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Kind of, I guess.
I mean, what would your vision be of the knowledge co-production process for the statistical methods?
Oh, it just wouldn't be statistical methods as we all understand it, right?
Okay.
So you can lay out a grid that of where you're gonna sample, how long you're gonna sample based on tested risk metrics.
Mhm.
Or you can go to Laura or somebody local and say, how would you guys go find lines? And then they have a different way of doing it, right?
Okay.
So that's what I mean.
Sure. But you agree that we'd want to converge on a number that is accurate?
I agree on that, but I don't know what accurate means. Anyway, it's a discussion, it's just sort of.
No, it's an interesting, yeah. Sorry, so do you want to add to that? Yeah, no, sure, but I think, sorry, man, what's your name? And I think what, Anna. So what Anna is averting to, though, is specifically actually developing the method in of itself with constituents on the ground. And I can't say that we have done that, but I would argue, yeah, I don't know. I still believe that, you know, I'd want to get as close to a number and as close to a sign of population health as possible as a scientist. And I certainly hope that the conservation entities on the ground would want to do the same. Because if we start to get into other gray areas of what it means for a lion population to be healthy, I feel that we are doomed, and so are the lions. Yeah. Has anybody got any other questions?
That's one question. So what are the status for the conflicts in the lions and community in the region?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And yes, lion conflicts with people and communities are fierce. And they have been seemingly getting fiercer every year in a number of different parks, whether it's Queen Elizabeth to Murchison to Adepo Valley. I think Adepo Valley, although I'm only doing the analysis now, the sad thing there, as I said, we found 5 lions, detected them 22 times. It's a monstrous protected area system. But the thing is there, my colleagues found lions in meat sacks, poacher meat sacks on 3 different occasions during the survey. So that's like quite a heavy example of that lion conflict there. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty rife across the country. Yeah.
The discussion was at the beginning, you said each lion, so it's bringing a lot of culture about tourism money. So maybe there's something.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are trying. There's a lot of different conservation entities that are trying to do human wildlife mitigation programs. There's some compensation schemes. And then obviously, most importantly, there's desnaring programs. There's a lot of bushmeat snaring. So for those of you who don't know, basically the use of wire cable snares is arguably the most, the biggest threat to mammalian biological diversity across Asia and Africa. And basically it's setting these cable snares across, animal paths. And often it doesn't target predators. You're targeting, medium-sized ungulates. And it's broken down into subsistence and commercial entities, the people that are doing this. But often lions, predators are particularly victim to this because don't forget, they're walking on the same areas where their prey are walking. So yeah, that's the answer to that. Sorry, maybe we have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, go. Maybe you first and then yes.
I'll just a quick one. What features of the lions make them individually identifiable?
Yeah, excellent question. So basically, every time you are driving towards a lion, you want to essentially take as many photos as possible. And you can look at anything. It can be a missing tail. It can be a missing canine. It can be the nose blackening. So typically what you'll find, there seems to be some relationship between nose darkening and pigmentation over time. Carol Whitman and Craig Packard did some of this work. It could be a missing eye. It could be discoloration in the eye. Some scarring occasionally, but you want to stay clear of scars because God knows that African lions, tigers, any big carnivore just has these amazing regenerative powers. They can be in the worst fights of their lives. And next week, it looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. It's amazing. So get as much information. And then obviously most important, the whisker spots are like tattoos. They don't change. Craig Packard did a study, 937 individuals, and I think 93% variation. No 2 lions are alike in terms of those patterns. Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Do you have any idea, so Adepo is, in terms of tourist areas, I think I can understand why, you saw no lions there, and also there's very few tourists that are in Adepo, right? Whereas you've got areas like Borough or Elizabeth where there's, you're close to the gorillas, you're close to.
Yeah.
Do you think there'd be a way to pull out, could you see a relationship between how popular the national park is as a tourist site versus how well or poorly the lion population is doing?
Yeah, I mean, in Queen Elizabeth from the 2018 paper that we did, I don't know, just been sifting through the data. I can't actually say how the population is doing, but I mean, we know from the 2018 data that the population wasn't doing well, and arguably the most, popular park in the whole country. With Murchison, from what I can see, I haven't done the analysis, but definitely the most different individuals there and biggest prides. And so, yeah, I don't really know what happened in Adepo. I don't know what on earth. And that's a population that's, again, this is what I'm saying, Jonathan, there's a lot of people criticizing monitoring, but here's the flip side to that. So that's a population that's basically flown under the radar. That's what I was telling to Tom. So again, with these models, we're not interested in these numbers. We're interested in those biological parameters and detection probability. So in Queen Elizabeth, as in Adepo, you get these absurd detection Ps, these P values, these high Ps, incredibly high detection probability. And why? Because they're sitting in trees. So I'm driving and what am I seeing? There they are again. But what's the hidden thing? It's the same lions. So overall, the lion density is low, but the probability is high. And that's, I think, what's happened in Adepo is that, yeah, we've seen the lions, they're fine. No, you've seen the same one. You're saying the same 3-4 individuals. And if you're not really on the ball, that population, those populations, whether they're elephants or lions or whatever it is, they're gonna be wiped out before your eyes without you even knowing it. So that's I guess the criticism against people that don't believe in monitoring. That's where I'd say those biological parameters are so critical in helping you understand how your population's doing. And then there was one from Kate.
It's just saying there seems to be a correlation between density and sampling intensity in the graph. How do you control for that in case it's under survey?
Well, sorry, that's not the case for Adepo, for example. So Adepo, as I said, there is, I haven't run the numbers there. So, I'll get back to Peter, but there we've got 5,000 kilometers of search effort. And as I said, we detected lions 22 times, 5 individuals. And don't forget though, this is cool. So the cool thing is that, again, we are trying to, bring some of these historic methods, the way that people monitored lions 20 years ago, Anna, because there's actually a fight between lion researchers that are using call-up surveys. So, saying, the call-up surveys are fine. But the problem is obviously they don't deal with individual recognition. And obviously also we're making big assumptions around how lions are responding to calls. But here we actually overlay another layer of effort where we did call-up surveys, but we repurposed those call-ups. So we called in the lions and then we'd photograph to get the individual identity. So here you've got an added layer of effort. So actually, to contrary to Peter's question, we've got 2 layers of effort. We've got the physical searching for lions. And yes, obviously that far eastern flank, we just couldn't get in there. It's just, there's no roads. You fly over this area. It is one of Africa's last super wilderness areas. It is so remote. This is touching onto Kenya. So we just couldn't get vehicles in there. It's just ridiculous how remote it is. But yeah, so I don't think that, so the model does deal with increased search effort. It does, because it factors in detection probability. So have we got any other questions, or have we got any?
Got thanks and compliments from the team on such an engaging talk as always.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Martine. Yeah. So as I said, Martine was really a foundation for it, and why we kind of expanded the work in the first place. So yeah, I'm grateful to her. Anybody else? Anybody shy? No such thing as a silly question. Nothing. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Everybody.